Can robots feel? Well, do androids dream of electric sheep? In the Philip K. Dick story that inspired the film Blade Runner, bounty hunters chased androids who were passing for human and tested whether or not they could really feel. Now, the Turing test says that if we can't tell the difference between human and machine, then to all intents and purposes, it's human. But in Blade Runner, the bounty hunters use more and more sophisticated tests until they can spot the difference. Fortunately, today, we're not dealing with androids. At best, we're dealing with electric sheep. This is LS3, a military pack mule from Boston Dynamics. Now, Boston Dynamics builds robots for the DARPA Robotics Grand Challenge, where the world's most advanced robots compete to perform simple tasks that would be useful in a disaster situation. Things like opening doors, climbing ladders, turning off taps, using power tools, and driving cars. All very simple for people. I think everyone here can do those things, but they're very, very difficult for robots. The director of the DARPA Robotics Challenge, Gil Pratt, says that a human toddler is more capable than our most sophisticated robots. A robot body may be big, but the brain is somewhere between an insect and a mouse. Now, this doesn't matter to us if robots are useful. And we rarely notice robots that are useful. We call them appliances or automation. Going by the numbers, humanoids are the least popular robots in the world today. There are almost 2 million industrial robot arms out there, and the sales of small drones have really taken off. But we tend to say that the most widely distributed robot in the world today is the robot vacuum cleaner, with iRobot alone shipping more than 10 million Roombas, and they are just one of a half dozen companies. But really, the most widely distributed robot in the world today is your car, and planes, and trains. Not the fully autonomous vehicles of the future, but our vehicles today are as sophisticated as any other robot. But we don't call them robots, we call them cars. And that's why I say that your next household robot will be your house. And it won't be Rosie the robot made from the Jetsons. It will be more like Rosie the robot house. Now, this may be as simple as your Nest thermostat talking to another appliance, talking to your smartphone. Our definition of a robot is something that senses, something that thinks, and something that acts. It doesn't have to have one body. Now, sensors can be scattered around. Thinking can take place in the cloud or can be distributed in nodes. And acting, opening, closing, heating, cooling, rolling, rotating, these are all actions. And what that means is that we won't be looking at a robot, we'll be living inside the robot. It'll be like a magic house. And in fact, I think it's really good to substitute the words magic and technology, because that frees our imagination. We can think of problems we'd really like solved, as if by magic, and then we can reverse engineer. Otherwise, we limit ourselves to building only what we can build with the tools immediately at our disposal. And what does this look like? Does anyone remember the television comedy from the 60s, Bewitched? Well, the premise is that an ordinary human falls in love with a magical witch, and they live in the ordinary world. So Sabrina the witch is not supposed to use her magic. But she does. And what does Sabrina usually do? She does a lot of housework. By hand, she prepares meals from fresh ingredients. She washes dishes at the sink. She hoovers the floor. She hangs out clothes on the clothesline. And every so often, she'll twitch her nose, and the job will happen by magic. Now, fast forward 50 years, and I'm actually living in Sabrina's magic house, because I don't do any of those things by hand. I have appliances and services that do them for me. The future is here. It's just not evenly distributed. And most of the world is still waiting for the future that I have Not only that, but we frequently can't see the future that is just around the corner from us. Especially when we get distracted by humanoids and human-robot interaction. Did you know there are animals living with robots today? There are automated dairy farms where cows are milking and feeding themselves 24/7 without human intervention. We like to think that it was tool use that separated humans from animals, and then that it was only our close cousins, the primates, that could use tools. The reality is that many animals use tools. In fact, there are 33 species of birds that use tools, as best as we can tell. And crows are so clever, they have the reasoning ability of a 6 or 7-year-old. So crows use tools. Crows also use tools to use tools. Crows even use humans as tools. They drop hard-shelled nuts in front of cars so that we'll drive over them and crack the nuts for them. So we humans think we're so clever. How are we going to talk to our house robots when really tens of thousands of years of device interaction, the best that we've done is brute force? We have only just started to add bells and whistles, and gears and levers, and clocks and steam, and punch cards. Jacques de Vaucanson built some of the world's first androids, a flute player, a drummer, and the digesting duck. Voltaire called him a rival to Prometheus and said that the duck was the glory of France. The King of France ordered Vaucanson to automate silk looms. Now, this so outraged French textile workers that there were many violent demonstrations. Vaucanson was attacked. In revenge, he built a completely automated silk loom powered only by donkeys. This was not a commercial success. In fact, Vaucanson had to leave town in a hurry, in disguise. Now, a generation later, the Jacquard loom was actually less automated, but more palatable. Still, Vaucanson inspired the world's first computer. In the 1840s, Charles Babbage had built the difference engine, which was a complex adding machine, but each of the gears on the columns had to be manually put into position at the start of each calculation. And when Babbage saw the automated silk looms, he decided to use punch cards for the Analytical Engine, which was to be the world's first computer. And punch cards could provide both inputs and commands or operations. But it was actually Ada Lovelace, the world's first computer programmer, who, working alongside with Babbage, could see the future potential of the Analytical Engine. She wrote that in the future, machines will manipulate all symbols, not just numbers. That we will compute with words or music, all algebraically. Although 100 years went by before we had a working computer, we continued to play with wires and sockets and switches and tapes and dials and knobs and punch cards and keyboards, until finally we were computing with words, and then computing with pictures, with the graphical user interface. Douglas Engelbart and his research colleagues at SRI in 1968 demonstrated the graphical user interface. They also demonstrated Windows, hypertext, the mouse, the early internet, dynamical file editing, collaborative editing, video teleconferencing. In fact, every major advance in computing and the internet was demonstrated in that 90-minute mother of all demos. And now, well, we dream of dancing with our digital information and of communicating naturally with our devices. We now have Siri and Cortana and co. But voice communication needs augmenting with other inputs. We need text, we need touch, we need gesture. Gesture is remarkably difficult. It took a long time for the Kinect sensor to be able to differentiate between people and cushions, or between people and pets. Nest had to recall their smoke alarm until they turned off the Nest wave function. It seems like a great idea to have a gesture turning your alarm off, but not when unintentional gestures turn the alarm off. It's very important to understand the context. People are very good at that. People use all of their senses to communicate. So we look, we listen, we read words and pictures, we read gestures, we read body language, we use touch, we even smell. We also interpret. Robots are very limited. And yet we need robots that are better at understanding us and communicating with us. Why? Because there are more and more machines in our lives, and we need to be able to communicate with them. And this is a two-way street. We need to communicate with them, they need to communicate with us. This is a dialogue, and that's why I say we need a social user interface in the future. And that robots and avatars will be the social user interface between us and the rest of our smart world. Here's an example. Savioke have just deployed a hotel delivery robot, Allo. Allo has a touchpad, beeps, flashes lights, and Allo also phones or texts you to say, knock, knock, your delivery's at the door. Which is good because Allo can't knock and can't open doors, but it can use tools to get you to help. Aldebaran are building sophisticated humanoids that are capable of emoting, and they convey information very naturally. But are they as good at understanding us? Context is critical, and so is understanding our emotions. This is Sophie, a virtual nurse assistant from Geppetto Labs, and Sophie uses an emotion engine to interpret the features of the face, the choice of words, and the tone of voice. And by attributing emotion, is better able to understand speech, which is quite ambiguous otherwise. We know that yes can actually mean a lot of different things. Now, it doesn't matter if it's a virtual avatar or whether it's a real robot. What we're seeing right now is the birth of the artificial personality. Artificial personalities, avatars, and robots are our new social user interface, but they don't feel. They don't have real understanding. So these are still not the science fiction androids we were looking for. We don't have C-3PO, we don't even have R2-D2 yet. At best, we have electric sheep. And speaking of sheep, the final irony of Philip K. Dick's Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep is that in his future, humans dreamt of electric sheep too, because it was all we could afford, because animals were scarce and very precious. So in our rapidly aging future, I believe that people will be more precious, and we will all need robot helpers with social awareness. We'll need our electric sheep with emotion engines. Thank you.